Craig, I just, on Monday I was at the Teaching Excellence session, focus group, and they're talking about what would it take to have all teachers being excellence in our school. And one individual said, have them all come from the University of Lethbridge. So I thought you should hear that. That was a unsolicited comment, and I know that you're on that committee. You need to check and make sure that they've included that in the feedback that you get to make meaning of. I've always had a very high regard for the University of Lethbridge. For the 25 years in the County of Wheatland and Golden Hills, we had a lot of student teachers from this university, and we hired a lot of teachers, and without exception, they were very, very good teachers. And we had school principals that came and got their master's degrees here and spoke very highly of the program. I enjoyed being involved in the summer institutes here with David and Pam and Paco, and stayed in residence here. It was very, very good. And David Townsend, I'd like to comment in regard to the impact that he's had on education, because he used to come out to Golden Hills, to our school jurisdiction, and we go out to Carbon, to the Good and Plenty restaurant, and be off in this little area with all of our administrators, and David would come in and he would pose a question. He didn't come to make a presentation, he just posed a question. That's what I'm hoping today we can explore some big questions. So he would say, well, are you instructional leaders? So what do you think they're going to say? Well, they all wave their hands. Yes, we're all instructional leaders. And he said, well, what are you doing that shows that you're an instructional leader? That type of thing, that's powerful. So we need more people from the universities, and Pam is part of that, and Dave, and I know there are others from this university that do that. That's what we really need. We need people that are coming out in the schools, and just like the two of you have been out in schools today. We need to continue doing that. George Bedard, I have memories of working with him on the Principal Quality Standard in 2005-2006, where we developed what was supposed to be, from the Learning Commission, the Principal Quality Standard. And it turned out to be professional practice competencies, and I think you know about the 7 competencies. That was very good work, I think, that was done, but it's still on the minister's desk. We still think that we need something like that, so we're waiting to see what's going to come out of that. So I think this actually is an exciting time in education. That when you think back through the years, there was a language that we'd hear from Alberta education. It was something like compliance, alignment. Do you remember that language? And we'd say, I wonder what's coming down the tube next, as if we were sort of trying to push back whatever it was. But with Inspiring Education, Minister Dave Hancock set up a very good process of getting grassroots input. And I think what's come out of that, and in this case, our Minister Jeff Johnson was co-chair of that committee, so he totally is supporting it. I think what has come out of that, the vision in Inspiring Education, the focus on learner competencies, everything that's there, I think is good. I don't know if you all feel that way, but I think it's something that I totally believe in. That it's good to have an initiative that's coming provincially, and in fact, not only is it an initiative, it's been mandated through a ministerial order, and that doesn't happen very often. In June, the minister signed off on that document, meaning that it's supposed to be happening. And that's pretty interesting. It's pretty exciting. And we have a deputy minister, Greg Bass, who's someone that I know very well. He was deputy superintendent in the Rocky View School Division, and he really had an understanding of what Inspiring Education was all about, and he was doing things at the system level to try to make that happen. So we have a deputy minister that understands education. It's been quite a few years that we've had an educator in the deputy minister's role, which I'm not commenting on whether that's good or bad. It's just a fact that I think there are some advantages to someone in Greg's perspective that has an understanding of how schools and school systems operate. So it is an exciting time. But what we're talking about is bigger than change, because the minister is talking about transformation. A change is like a tune-up to the engine, but a transformation is like a new engine. So can we pull this off? I think we know when we've had attempts at change in the past, it's very difficult to make it happen. So what we're talking about is not just change, but when you talk about change, people say, well, does that mean that what we're doing isn't right? And look at how hard I'm working. I'm pouring my heart out into this role and what I'm doing, and then you say that's not good enough? So people get defensive, and they start saying, well, you don't know what it's like. That's what I was hearing on Monday about teacher burnout and about all of the things that are the realities that are impacting the classroom. And that is true, that there are those realities. But I believe that this idea of that it's inspiring education is invigorating. That when you promote learning and teaching and you engage students, you don't experience burnout, you experience a great deal of excitement. So, in the spirit of asking questions, what David would say is, do we really need a transformation in education? That's one question. Do we need a transformation in education? Because that's huge. That's pulling the engine out and putting it in a whole new one. If we did have a transformation, what would it look like? Because if we can't visualize it, then it's not likely to happen, is it? So we all have to have an idea in our mind what we think it would look like. And I don't want to give you the impression, I don't want to be presumptuous about this, because I want to share something from the Calgary Science School, and I don't want to make it seem like that we've discovered the answer. So we haven't discovered the answer. We've had a few little insights along the way. And we actually, just in June 2012, we had, I probably could talk to you about charter schools, because a lot of you probably don't even know much about charter schools, just like I didn't know much about charter schools. I remember going around in Golden Hills, and I had this PowerPoint presentation, and I said, every school should be a charter school. I didn't know what I was talking about, but it was a brilliant idea, really. And what I meant, I think, is that every school should know what they're all about, what they represent, and what they're trying to do. And it's bigger than having a vision statement and a mission statement on the wall that no one knows what it is. So as a charter school, there are 13 charter schools. We have a mandate to have very clear goals of what set down, what we're hoping to achieve. And we just went through the process, and we developed a series of goals based on the teaching quality standard, based on our former charter, but a lot of it was based on inspiring education, and a lot of it was based on our experiences with learning and teaching through a disposition of inquiry, enhancing learning and teaching through the use of technology, with every student having a laptop or an iPad, taking learning beyond the classroom, engaging students, collaborating and researching. So that's what we built on to develop our charter. I am conscious of the time, because I want to get to my 10 things that need to happen to transform education, and we don't want to shortchange that. The advantage we have is that we are a speedboat compared to an ocean tanker. It's easier to bring about change in one school than it is in a whole system, jurisdiction of schools. So, and we have incredible parental support too. That's another factor that we'll talk about. But just other things, if you saw exemplary learning and teaching frameworks, that is powerful for us, that we've outlined what is expected of teachers, what is expected of students, and it all fits with inspiring education. So we use that in hiring teachers for professional development, for their growth plans, and for students, each student does a learning plan. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Parental involvement. How do we get parental involvement? I think there's, in my experience in a rural school jurisdiction, there was always good parental involvement. So that's just something to build on. But charter schools got started by parents who felt they weren't being listened to. And that's a powerful lesson for us. and they can do so much to help. Focus on community, building social capital. So one of our teachers did a project, a research and innovation project, to measure the social capital of our school last year. And the number he came up with was 822. So what does 822 represent? We had 822 visitors to the school last year. People that were in classrooms spending at least half a day. So, and we had student teachers. I was talking to Pam about that. What was our index or metric? 270 student teachers in our school last year. So this can happen in any school. And you're saying, how in the world could that have been? We had U of L student teachers, we had the Mount Royal and U of C. We had teachers bringing in a whole class, and they would come and do work in the classroom just on a one-day basis. We think that's very important work for us because we learn a lot. And that's why teachers are open to that. Why would teachers have people come into their classroom? Why wouldn't they just close their doors? And it's that it's value added for them. They're benefiting from it. And the students end up being our greatest ambassadors. So they talk about what learning and teaching looks like in our school. So then they end up telling the story. They know the story because they're telling it so many times. We had a conference in May that Pam was at, Connect Ed Canada, where we had 300 people from all over Canada. The first day of the conference was Friday, where they spent the whole day in classrooms at the school. So that's why I'm saying that we need to make teaching practices public, and it works and it really pays off for people. That's building social capital. We learned something, and we're learning so much about inquiry. We're going back to Galileo and inquiry rubric because we need a refresher. We learned that inquiry is not a program, it's a disposition, it's a way of thinking. And that was a great revelation. We learned about technology and the appropriate use of technology, and we'll get into that later with the other discussion about technology. Hands-on learning, you could see that, many examples. Connected to real-life experiences, all those things. Deprivatization of teaching, like to me that is huge. Sharing through social media. Why are we getting 500 hits a day on a school website? And I encourage you to go and look at the Connect blogs where people are blogging it, and it's because there's a real desire to learn from others. And I really want to emphasize our teachers, their greatest learning experiences are when they go to other schools. So we've been partnering with the Rocky View School Division and CB, any ones we can get our teachers into, because we learn there are great things happening in all over. But as Sharon Friesen has said, that we have to move from best practices. We have best practices everywhere, but we need to move from best practice to common practice, where it's not the exception. The whole business of instructional leadership, again with David working in Golden Hills, and Pam was doing the same. She would come and work with our principals, because what do you do as an instructional leader? That's a big question, and we really we're still trying to make meaning out of that. And when you saw in this video clip, I think you saw the teachers were engaged. Did you hear that one teacher? They don't look burned out, do they? And because they are totally engaged. So I want to get to the handout that I've given you, and it would be, what would it take to bring about a transformation in education? And I've outlined 10 points, and I wanted it to be more where we have an opportunity to interact too. But I just wanted to interject with this one slide, which wouldn't mean much. It means a lot to people from Edmonton because it's Randy Furby. But does it mean anything to any of you? Are there any of you that are very sophisticated curlers and know about Randy Furby, who won the world championship many times? But he did something that no other skip in the past had ever done. What was that? He didn't throw the last rocks because he realized there was someone better than him to throw the last rocks. So he threw the third rocks. And when he put down the broom, remember how it used to be the skip would put down the broom, and that was, he called the shots. you remember when the principal would put down the broom, the principal called the shots, and you wouldn't question? Well, Randy Furby created a culture where he'd put down the broom and the lead would get up and come back all the way down the ice. I'm not sure that that's the best thing to be doing. And then they'd all gather around, they look and talk about it, and they decide what's the best thing. That's the model of leadership that we need. We don't want to be where it's just one individual. We want it to be where you go with people's strengths, dispersed leadership. So there's a handout there where I've listed the 10 action strategies that I would say. What would it take to bring about a transformation in education? And again, I want you to comment too about this, but is it important to have a shared vision? And how important is that? Well, from my perspective, like when you hear people talking about inspiring education, I hear people saying, well, we really got to get ready for this, for 2016, when this comes out. But actually, it's out already with the ministerial order, isn't it? And then you hear people saying, well, I'm not exactly sure what this looks like. They don't realize what it's really like in schools. So do you think we're really going to have any change if we have that kind of thinking? We really do need to have people that can articulate, what does this look like? And that could tell the story and convince others that it's a good story. If that doesn't happen, it's not going to happen. That's how I see it. The second one is about making teaching practices open and public. What did you think about that? Because I think when you saw, and when we're describing what happens, does that seem artificial that that wouldn't happen in schools? So I think in the past, teaching has been a solo activity, hasn't it? And teachers have been isolated. And that is one of the most profound revelations I've had, is that we need to open the doors of our classrooms, we need to take the roofs off our schools, and we need to make teaching practice open and where everyone is coming together and sharing and learning from each other and learning together. Do any of you have any thoughts about that? I think that's how we're going to make change, is by doing that. And as I said, by allowing teachers to go to other schools and see what's happening. That's why we welcome guests, because every time we have guests, we learn from them. You got some thoughts on that?
Well, we're just trying to decide where we are.
Yeah?
In terms of the question.
I think what you'd expect is it would be threatening for teachers to have people come into their classrooms. That's what I would expect.
We're just saying, like, a lot of this, looking at this new, transformation, and we're starting a school such as the Science School is, I guess it's easier to look at it from a staff perspective coming in. If you're starting something new, and you're hiring staff and looking at doing something, everybody knows where they're starting at, and everybody knows the philosophy. Where you come into schools where teachers are all over the place, implementing any type of or even small changes sometimes could be enormously taxing.
And so if you tell them to open up their doors, you don't necessarily want them to open up their doors. Is that part of it, or you're not sure that? And that's maybe what they're thinking too. I'm not doing anything that I should be sharing with others, but as soon as they open up the doors, they get people saying, well, I like this, and then they ask questions and teachers learn from it. Our teachers don't have it all worked out. They just learn from having people come to the school. Yeah.
I think it's a concept of purposeful collaboration as well, though.
Yeah.
That if it's not purposeful, if there's not a sense of why it's happening, if there's not an agreement for why it's happening, then it really doesn't pay off in the end.
Right.
Those that have purposeful collaboration time, we've seen amazing results in our schools. But those that have said we have collaboration time, but then they get in there, they have no guidance, they have no purpose for it.
Yeah.
It turns into a session of maybe complaining or teacher marking time.
Right.
So it's that purposeful time.
Right. And I think that it's like when we start out, the Learning Commission mandated every school will be a professional learning community, if you can imagine that. So like every family will be happy, and and then we had teachers saying, well, we have PLC on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. And that's like collaboration. Well, we collaborate Tuesday mornings, and it has to become a disposition, a way of thinking. And I want to talk more about collaboration, because I think that's a very fundamental key. And we can't get away from leadership, and it's leadership at all levels. So we've got a minister, we've got a deputy minister that's really pushing for this. We've got the university role, we've got all the different roles. We can make this happen if we all see this as a shared vision, but we have to be able to, there has to be buy-in. We have to see this, and we have to be very good at telling the story and sharing the dream. The student one is one that I don't think we're doing a very good job of, hearing the student voice. So what we have done is we have Tell Them For Me. Do you do that? There's a survey. So the students respond, and then we find out a few months later what the level of engagement is. And then we do student surveys, and I actually, for the last 4 years, I interview every student. I go in and interview, but as class groups. So, and get their feedback and share that. That's useful. But what we're talking about is a different kind of student voice. And Pam got me going on this when she had her free fall writing. Has she ever got you to do free fall writing about instructional leadership, where you say what comes, first thing that comes out of your mind. And what came out of my mind, the student as instructional leader. Imagine that. What would it be like? I think that's far out. If the student was the instructional leader, not the principal, not the teacher, the student. That would mean the student would be directing his or her learning and be responsible for it. It's too far out. You wouldn't want to go that far. But we need to go a lot further that way than we are now. And we need to have teachers daily talking to students about how they learn, how would they like to learn, what approach they're going to take to different things. The students, we find over and over again, when we have people come into the school, the students steal the show every time because they know what it's all about. So I really want to talk about this culture of collaboration because we've learned something out of this. It's like when I had student teachers, they'd say, I'm never going to have students in rows. I'm going to get them to do group work. As if group work was better than students in rows. It isn't if it's mindless and if it's not well organized. Collaboration is not valuable if people don't know how to collaborate. So we have a collaboration rubric, and our teachers have common planning time, and that's a real advantage. We have 4 classes at each grade level, so they have a lot of planning time, common planning time. But again, we found looking at the collaboration rubric, are they really collaborating? And so they can look at what they're doing. And now they're doing it with their students. So we have students sitting in groups and they're doing Google Docs and Edmodo, do you know about different uses of technology? So they know what each student's contributing. So my thing on collaboration is that I have never done anything in my life on my own that's nearly as powerful as what I've done with others. Can any of you dispute that? That I totally believe in the power of collaboration. And so but we have to say what it looks like Alberta Ed is talking collaboration, but we've got to really work at how do we make that happen? How do we collaborate? How do we really collaborate with universities? And so that it's not just a talk, but it's really happening. So that's the challenge. Partnering with universities. I would say that if we're going to have a transformation in education, the university is the key. What you're doing, it really is. Because you are change agents, and you are creating teachers that we're wanting in our classrooms. And so what's wrong with what's happening now? And I think Craig's heard me say when we've had some of the meetings with the deputy minister and the deans of universities that I don't think GPA is the best way of picking our future teachers. And I don't think it's right to say that we have faculties of education that aren't uncomfortable with having only half of their graduates go into classrooms because they might like the B.Ed and it'll help them be a good car salesman. We need to be really focusing on preparing our students for the classroom. So that's where we need universities to be modeling and mentoring the 3 E's, if we call it that, all those things that we want to have happening in our classrooms. But then what I found out in working with student teachers, we had U of C was inquiry-based. We were totally into that. But then we take our students into schools where it wasn't inquiry, so how is that going to reinforce the kind of teachers we want for the future? So we really need to be totally together on what we're doing. The technology question, I think a lot of people, when they talk about transforming education, they think it's all going to happen through technology. And what we have learned is that when we stop talking about technology, we'll know we've made it, when that isn't our focus. And it's learning and teaching, it's not technology. But there's some incredible ways that technology enhances learning and teaching, and we need to build on that. When I see what students are doing with QR codes, Erasmus, virtual reality, all kinds of technology, it's incredible. The other thing that I was hearing about at the Teaching Excellence Forum is that people were saying, you need to realize that we're living in a different world. We've got so much diversity in our classrooms, and we do, don't we? It's much more diverse. So is that a problem, or is that an opportunity? I guess it depends on how you look at it, because it's an opportunity to develop diverse teaching practices. So it's the idea you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Well, what's the other part of that? Well, then change the water. That's what we need to be looking at. So the idea that a teacher would say, well, I've delivered the goods, and if they didn't get it, well, I guess I've done everything I can. Rather, the approach would be, it didn't work. Let's work out how we can do it in another way. And a lot of that would be hearing the student voice. And the idea, we do need to make some changes in our curriculum. But do we have to wait till 2016 till we have a new curriculum before we can do things in a different way? Well, I think you saw here, and you see in your own schools, great teachers are taking the program of studies, the learning outcomes, and they're making things happen just by making learning engaging. It's what they do with the curriculum. But we could do a lot better if we didn't have to have so much breadth, if we could go deeper, and if it was more interconnected. Yes, we need changes in curriculum, but that's just one thing. And then the final thing is really the idea of research and working together. That's where we really need the universities to be doing research and developing research-based practices, and where we need to get our teachers thinking as action researchers and making it happen. So I had a vision. If we would have started a little earlier, like to have this more interactive. But I've dumped my load here. So I really want to know what you're thinking and feeling about this. That I think we have an incredible opportunity to do something totally exciting in education. There's nothing like my office is right in the school, which is pretty incredible. So I'm in classrooms. I'm just on a part-time basis, but I'm in classrooms every day. I'm there. And when I see teachers engaged and students engaged, that's exciting. And that's I'm sure you see that when you see that happening in your schools. And that's what we want to strive for.